to grow up in that situation where, in fact, the environment was set up for actors to not improvise, but participate, make suggestions, things like that. And even as a 6-year-old, I mean, my dad was having to read the lines at the read-through, and I would just kind of sit there at first. My father rants. But later, when I started to learn to read and so forth, I was in it. And I actually started occasionally making a suggestion.
Years after leaving the Andy Griffith Show, that was the most honest way Ron Howard ever described his relationship with the woman who played his on-screen aunt, Frances Bavier. I don't think Frances Bavier ever really liked me. On screen, everything looked perfect. Aunt Bee was always gentle with Opie. She cooked for him, cared for him, and spoke with warmth. Millions of viewers believed they were watching a real family. But when the cameras stopped rolling, Howard, who was only 6 years old at the time, began to sense something was wrong. Bavier rarely spoke to him. There were no smiles, no warmth like the audience saw on television, only distance. For decades, Howard barely talked about it. But now, later in life, he has finally begun to reveal what really happened. And the truth behind the relationship between Opie and Aunt Bee may shock you. Background of the two actors and the environment of the series. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, into a family already involved in the entertainment industry. His father, Rance Howard, worked steadily as a film and television actor, while his mother, Jean Spiegel Howard, also pursued acting and writing. Because of this environment, Ron Howard was introduced to professional acting at a very young age. His parents believed that if their son was going to work in Hollywood, he needed to understand both the discipline and the realities of the profession early. As a result, Howard began appearing in small acting roles before he even started elementary school. In 1959, at the age of 5, Howard appeared in one of his first screen performances. The following year brought the role that would define his childhood. In 1960, he was cast as Opie Taylor in The Andy Griffith Show, a new CBS sitcom centered on life in the fictional town of Mayberry. Howard was only 6 years old when production began, making him the youngest regular member of the cast. On set, Howard spent most of his time surrounded by experienced adult actors. He later described himself as a quiet and observant child who paid close attention to the behavior of the people around him. Because the show focused on family relationships, the working environment often felt warm and friendly to him. Many members of the cast treated him with patience and encouragement. The show's lead actor, Andy Griffith, frequently joked with the crew between takes and maintained a relaxed attitude during rehearsals. Meanwhile, Don Knotts, who played the nervous deputy Barney Fife, became known for improvising lines and entertaining the crew during breaks in filming. This playful atmosphere made the set feel comfortable for a child actor. Howard later said that these early experiences shaped how he understood collaboration in filmmaking. Watching older actors work together gave him a practical education in timing, performance, and professional behavior on a film set. However, not every member of the cast shared this easygoing attitude. Frances Bavier came from a very different background and brought a very different philosophy to her work. She was born on December 14, 1902, in New York City, and began her acting career decades before the rise of television sitcoms. Bavier trained as a stage performer and spent many years working in theater, including productions associated with Broadway. For much of her early career, acting meant performing serious dramatic material in front of live audiences. Because of this background, Bavier approached acting as a formal craft that required careful preparation and strict attention to the written script. Her professional habits were shaped by the traditions of the American stage, where actors memorized lines precisely and treated rehearsal as an essential part of performance. During the 1930s and 1940s, she built a reputation as a reliable stage actress. In the 1950s, she gradually moved into film and television work, which offered more stable employment as stage opportunities declined by the time she joined The Andy Griffith Show. Bavier was already 58 years old and had spent more than 2 decades in professional acting. The role of Aunt Bee gave her steady income and nationwide recognition. But several people who worked on the show later suggested that she never fully embraced the part. After years of stage work and dramatic performances, playing a cheerful small-town housekeeper was very different from the roles she had trained for earlier in her career. Some members of the cast believed that Bavier felt typecast by the character, instead of being remembered as a Broadway-trained actress. She was becoming known primarily as a television aunt who cooked meals and managed a household in a fictional rural town. This perception may have influenced her attitude toward the show and the people working on it. The atmosphere on the set was often relaxed and informal, particularly in scenes involving Andy Griffith and Don Knotts. Both actors enjoyed experimenting with comedic timing, and they sometimes adjusted lines or reactions during rehearsal in order to improve the humor of a scene. While the production team generally allowed this style of performance, it did not match Bavier's approach to acting. She preferred to follow the script closely and maintain a more controlled style of performance. According to comments later shared by Rance Howard, there was already some tension between Bavier and Andy Griffith during the early years of the series. Griffith enjoyed spontaneous humor and informal rehearsals, while Bavier preferred structure and predictability in her work. For most adult actors, these differences remained professional rather than personal. However, for young Ron Howard, the situation created a confusing contrast between the story being filmed and the relationships behind the camera. In the script, Aunt Bee served as a caring guardian for Opie, offering advice and affection in many family scenes. Because of these interactions, Howard naturally expected a similar sense of warmth from the actress who played the role. Instead, Bavier maintained a formal distance from many members of the cast, including the child actor playing her on-screen nephew. Howard later said that she was not openly hostile, but she rarely engaged in casual conversation or playful interaction outside the moments required by the script. In retrospect, many observers see this dynamic as a quiet clash between 2 generations of performers. Frances Bavier represented an older tradition shaped by theater discipline and formal professionalism, while Ron Howard belonged to a younger generation growing up in the more relaxed and collaborative environment of television production. This contrast did not immediately create open conflict, but it established the underlying tension that would remain present throughout the 8 years the show remained on the air. The tension on the set. As production continued on The Andy Griffith Show throughout the early 1960s, a quiet but noticeable tension developed around Frances Bavier. While the show portrayed a warm and cheerful family life in the fictional town of Mayberry, the atmosphere behind the camera was not always the same for everyone involved, according to several cast members who later spoke about the production. Bavier often appeared emotionally distant from the rest of the group. Most of the cast treated the set like a relaxed workplace, where humor helped long filming days pass more easily. Andy Griffith frequently joked between takes and encouraged a playful energy during rehearsals. Don Knotts was especially known for his improvisational style. He often experimented with facial expressions, pauses, and unexpected reactions that made scenes funnier. Crew members sometimes laughed during rehearsal because Knotts would invent small variations in his performance. However, Bavier rarely participated in that environment. Several people who worked on the series later described her behavior as formal and reserved. When filming stopped, she often returned to her dressing room rather than staying on set to socialize, while other actors talked, joked, or rehearsed together. Bavier usually remained quiet and focused only on the work required for the scene. For young Ron Howard, the difference was noticeable. Howard later recalled that most of the cast treated him warmly because he was a child actor working long hours on a professional set. Griffith sometimes talked with him between scenes and explained how certain jokes worked. Don Knotts often entertained him by exaggerating gestures or voices while preparing for a take. But Bavier behaved very differently. Howard remembered that she rarely initiated conversation with him unless it directly related to the scene they were filming. When the cameras stopped rolling, the emotional warmth that appeared between Aunt Bee and Opie during the episode disappeared almost immediately. Howard later described the experience as confusing because the affectionate relationship the audience saw on television did not exist in the same way behind the camera. In his memoir, The Boys, written decades later, Howard reflected on Bavier's attitude toward the environment of the show. He explained that the relaxed humor common on the set did not appeal to her personality or her professional values, as he wrote in the book. She was not a fan of the high jinks. This difference in philosophy created a subtle division within the group. Griffith and Knotts believed that comedy improved when actors felt free to explore timing and reactions during rehearsal. Bavier believed that the script should be followed carefully and that actors should maintain discipline rather than improvising. Because of this disagreement, interactions between Bavier and the other actors were sometimes strained. Howard later heard from adults on the set that Bavier had never developed a strong personal connection with Griffith. Even though their characters shared many scenes together, some members of the crew believed that Bavier disliked the casual humor Griffith brought to the production. Her relationship with Don Knotts was also distant, according to stories repeated by several cast members over the years. The two actors rarely spoke outside of scenes they were filming together. Conversations between them were usually brief and focused only on the technical requirements of the script. Directors who worked on the show sometimes noticed the tension as well. One of the series directors, Howard Morris, later described working with Bavier as a delicate process that required careful communication. Crew members occasionally joked that directing her scenes felt like walking across a field of landmines, because even small suggestions about performance could sometimes be interpreted as criticism because of this sensitivity. People working around Bavier often tried to choose their words carefully. No one wanted to start an argument that might slow down the filming schedule. Television production during the 1960s followed strict time limits, and delays could create problems for the entire crew. The result was an unusual atmosphere in which most of the cast remained friendly and energetic, while one central performer remained largely isolated from the group. For Ron Howard, this situation became an early lesson about the reality of acting. At 6 years old, he had entered the show expecting that the relationships written into the script would naturally extend into real life. The character Aunt Bee was supposed to represent warmth, stability, and family care for Opie. When Bavier performed the role in front of the camera, she delivered exactly that image. But the moment filming stopped, the emotional tone changed. Howard later said that this contrast forced him to recognize something important about the profession much earlier than most child actors. The affection displayed on screen was part of the performance. It did not always reflect genuine relationships between the actors themselves. In other words, the chemistry visible to the audience was created through effort and professionalism rather than personal closeness. This realization stayed with Howard for the rest of his career. Observers who studied the history of the show have sometimes described Bavier's behavior as a form of quiet resentment that slowly accumulated over time. She rarely expressed anger directly, but her formal distance suggested that she never felt completely comfortable within the production. Some people close to the show later suggested that Bavier struggled emotionally with how the role defined her public identity. She had spent decades building a reputation as a trained stage actress, yet millions of viewers now recognized her primarily as a fictional aunt in a rural television comedy. There are also accounts that Bavier sought professional counseling during parts of her later career because she felt dissatisfied with how her work was perceived. Although these reports were never discussed publicly in detail, they contributed to the impression that she carried personal frustration beneath her professional exterior. If that was true, her strict behavior on set may have functioned as a kind of protective barrier by maintaining distance from the others. She could separate herself emotionally from a role that had brought fame, but also limited the public's understanding of her broader acting abilities. For the rest of the cast, however, the situation simply meant learning how to work around her personality. Scenes were completed successfully, and the show remained one of the most popular comedies on American television throughout the 1960s. Yet beneath that success remained a quiet tension that never fully disappeared during the series' 8-year run. For Ron Howard, watching these dynamics unfold became one of the most educational experiences of his childhood. The cheerful world of Mayberry looked effortless on screen, but behind the camera, he was already discovering that professional relationships in Hollywood were often far more complicated than the stories audiences believed. Specific incidents and the peak of the conflict. As the production of The Andy Griffith Show continued through the 1960s, several incidents made the tension surrounding Frances Bavier more visible to the cast and crew. Although Bavier rarely engaged in open arguments, her reactions to certain situations created moments that people on the set remembered for years. One of the most frequently repeated stories involved Jim Nabors, who joined the series in 1962 as the character Gomer Pyle. Nabors had a strong singing voice and often sang informally while waiting between scenes. According to several accounts from people who worked on the show, he sometimes practiced songs or hummed loudly near the filming area during breaks. On one occasion, Bavier reportedly became irritated by the noise. Witnesses later recalled that she confronted Nabors and swung her umbrella in his direction to force him to stop. The moment did not escalate into a serious physical altercation, but the incident immediately became known among the cast and crew. The story spread quickly across the production team because it revealed how easily tension could surface around Bavier. Many people already knew that she preferred a quiet and controlled working environment, and Nabors' energetic personality represented the opposite style. The event also drew attention from people connected to the production outside the immediate cast. Television producer Danny Thomas, who had professional ties to the series through Desilu Productions, reportedly criticized Bavier after hearing about the confrontation. However, Andy Griffith defended her position and asked others not to escalate the situation. Griffith understood that the show depended on cooperation among the actors, and public disputes could damage that stability. By supporting Bavier in that moment, he helped prevent the issue from becoming a larger controversy inside the production. For young Ron Howard, the incident became another example of how separated Bavier seemed from the rest of the cast. Howard did not personally argue with her, and there are no records of direct confrontations between the two. However, he was present on the set and observed the reactions of the adults around him. He later described feeling that Bavier often existed on the edge of the group rather than inside it. While other actors interacted comfortably, she maintained a visible distance that created the impression of isolation. As the series moved into its later seasons, that distance appeared to grow even stronger. Several cast members later recalled that Bavier spent less time socializing with the rest of the production team. She completed her scenes professionally, but avoided many informal gatherings connected to the show. Unlike some of the other actors, she rarely attended reunions or publicity events that celebrated the series after filming seasons ended. Her interactions with Don Knotts remained particularly limited. Knotts himself once commented that their conversations during the years of production rarely extended beyond a few short exchanges. According to one recollection shared by people who worked with them, Bavier and Knotts sometimes spoke no more than 5 words to each other outside the lines required by their scenes. This pattern reinforced the perception that Bavier had emotionally withdrawn from the social side of the show, even while continuing to perform her role on camera. For Ron Howard, these experiences gradually changed how he understood the profession he had entered as a child. On one side, he watched Andy Griffith demonstrate leadership through humor and patience. Griffith often tried to maintain a friendly atmosphere on set because he believed that relaxed actors performed better. His approach emphasized collaboration and trust among the cast. On the other side, Howard observed Bavier maintaining strict emotional boundaries from those same people. These two contrasting examples shaped Howard's early understanding of Hollywood. The cheerful family that viewers saw every week on television represented a carefully constructed illusion. Aunt Bee and Opie appeared to share a natural bond on screen. Yet the relationship between the actors remained distant and formal once filming stopped. Howard later explained that this contrast forced him to recognize an uncomfortable truth about acting. The emotions presented in a performance do not always reflect the personal feelings of the people involved. Professional actors can create convincing warmth even when their private relationships remain neutral or distant. In that sense, the tension surrounding Bavier became an early lesson for Howard about what he later described as the mask of Hollywood. Behind the smiling characters and comforting stories that audiences loved, the reality of production could involve disagreements, frustrations, and personalities that did not always fit together easily. The incidents involving Bavier did not destroy the production of the series, and the show remained one of the most successful comedies of its era. However, those moments revealed a division within the group that never completely disappeared. For a child actor watching from the center of that environment, the experience became a powerful education in the difference between the world created on screen and the far more complicated reality that existed behind the cameras. After the series and a late attempt at reconciliation, when The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, the cast members moved in very different directions, while Ron Howard continued acting and later built a successful directing career. Frances Bavier gradually withdrew from the entertainment industry. Bavier left California and moved to Siler City, North Carolina, choosing a quiet and private life. She rarely appeared at reunions connected to the show and avoided most contact with the media or former colleagues. At one point, Andy Griffith and Ron Howard even traveled to visit her, but she did not answer the door, reinforcing the sense that she had fully distanced herself from the cast. Near the end of her life in 1989, however, Bavier made an unexpected gesture. She contacted Andy Griffith to apologize for her difficult behavior during the years they worked together and later sent a letter expressing regret. Although she did not apologize directly to Ron Howard, he later reflected on her with a mixture of sympathy and respect. Howard suggested that Bavier may have struggled with being remembered mainly for one television role after a long career in theater. That frustration may have shaped her distant behavior on set. The experience also influenced Howard's own leadership style as a director, encouraging him to create collaborative, relaxed environments on his productions. In the end, the tension surrounding Frances Bavier became part of a larger lesson for Ron Howard about the complex realities behind the warmth audiences saw on screen.